I do think it comes back to who they are as a founder and what their superpower is and where they may not necessarily know, they need to invest in from the beginning.
But I feel like most startup founders are problem solvers, right? They see a problem and a lot of times they're like trying to solve their own problem. You're like, well, I need this thing. Maybe other people need this thing. But that doesn't mean they know anything about how to run a business.
I think it's very common for people to start businesses based on their own experience. I think that's why the founder story is always so interesting. Well, one thing I always encourage people to think about when it comes to that, though, is you are not your customer. You just need to make sure you have real product market fit with your customers and make sure you have somebody that has that superpower to help you uncover that.
And we're back for another episode of the Startup Hustle. This is your host, Matt Watson. Very excited to be joined today by Michelle Denogean, who's the Chief Marketing Officer of MindTrip. She also does a lot of advisory work for startups. She's also been watching us for a long time and wrote a really interesting book about how we're great at starting things, but not necessarily great at growing them. And she's going to give us some great insights today about a lot of challenges a lot of founders have with growing companies. She's got a great book about that called Grow Up. We're going to talk about that today. Before we get started, I do want to remind you that today's episode is brought to you by my company, Fullscale. If you need to hire software developers, you can check us out. I have 300 employees in the Philippines working for a couple hundred different tech companies doing all sorts of different stuff. Check us out at fullscale.io. Michelle, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks, Matt, for having me.
So you've been watching for founders for way too long and figured out all the things.
Seasoned. That's what I call it.
All the things that make us tick and all of our weaknesses is what it sounds like. You have figured us out.
I don't proclaim to have figured every little nick and cranny of the founder out, but I have been observing for a very long time what makes founders great and where they have potential blind spots to growth. So I won't claim to know everything about you, though, Matt. That's not my forte.
Well, I'm very excited to talk about your book, Grow Up, and the superpowers that you identified about startups and all the stuff. But the one thing I want to mention first is so your background is marketing, and you've done a lot of different kinds of marketing for different tech companies. And I think the first thing to point out is most founders are innovators, right? They're inventors. They're good at inventing things. And you help solve the problem probably that most founders are the worst at, which is marketing, right? I know how to invent this thing, but I have no idea what to do with it after I invent it. And you've had to be their hero, I imagine, for a long time.
Yeah, I think it is interesting, especially with startups, because to your point, I think the whole world tells startups to run fast, just build a great product, get it out there, the rest will happen. And there's always that moment in time where people have built something great and they're like, wait, now I need to figure out how to get people to know about it.
Yeah.
It is definitely where I shine, is to understand how to position companies and really honestly understand the history of what was it that made that innovation so incredible, and what's the story behind that, and then how do we actually bring that to market so that everybody in your specific industry is aware of you and your company.
Well, you worked for several different startups. Has that been a common theme at all of them? Is they built it and then they hired you because they didn't know how to sell it? Is that where you ended up most of the time?
It really depends. And I know we're going to talk about the superpowers of the founders from my book, but it really depends on the founder themselves and what their background is. So I have some that have brought me in super early because they are very aware. They have, either they are a connector or a really understand, they have parts of them that are that way. They really understand what that mindset is. And so then I'll come in really early from pretty much the very beginning, like I am here at MindTrip today. But there's some that, yes, it's they get really far along and then all of a sudden they're like, ooh, maybe we need more than just somebody sending emails and doing some paid stuff. Maybe I actually need to really think about how we're being positioned in the marketplace and have a strategy around this. And so I've worked with those types of founders too. And I do think it comes back to who they are as a founder and what their superpower is and where they may not necessarily know, they need to invest in from the beginning.
Well, so I'm excited to talk about the superpowers, and maybe this is kind of leading more into the conversation, but I feel like most startup founders are problem solvers, right? They see a problem, and a lot of times they're like trying to solve their own problem. Like a friend of mine started an outdoor kitchen cabinet company, which seems like a crazy thing, but he's like, I'm trying to build outdoor custom kitchen cabinets and nobody sells them. So I guess I'm going to have to do it. I'm going to be the crazy person and go start a company to do that. And now he does over $1 million a year in revenue building custom kitchen cabinets built by the Amish and selling them online. Crazy story, but that's how a lot of things start, right? You're like, well, I need this thing. Maybe other people need this thing. But that doesn't mean they know anything about how to run a business. Doesn't mean they know anything about sales or anything about marketing, right? They're innovators, or one of the superpowers that you identified was probably the builder or innovator. They're usually probably those personality types, right?
Yeah, I think it's very common for people to start businesses based on their own experience. I think that's why the founder story is always so interesting, right? You could take somebody like the founders at MyFitnessPal, and that was all based on a wedding that they were trying to plan, and they were trying to get prepared and fit for it. So everybody has a story like that of I have this problem, therefore. The one thing I always encourage people to think about when it comes to that, though, is you are not your customer. And so a lot of people start there, and that is, an innovation, so to speak. You just need to make sure you have real product market fit with your customers, and make sure you have somebody that has that superpower to help you uncover that. Because there's a difference between I have this problem, and there are enough people in this world. I'm sure there are a lot of people that want the custom cabinet. So I'm not tying this to that story, but you need to make sure that there are enough people willing to buy your product, even if it started and originated with something that you were having a problem with. Are there enough people with that problem, right? And that is where a true innovator comes in. And a lot of people start companies. They're not all innovators, even if they have these great ideas. And it's just really important that you have people with those skill sets to help you assess and make sure that it's going to be something that can grow and go the distance.
Well, and honestly, that was one of the mistakes, I'll call it a mistake, I had in my second company is I started it trying to solve my own problem. And I'm like, man, if I have this problem, everybody else has this problem. I talked to a few people and they're like, yeah, everybody kind of has this problem. I'm going to go build this thing. Not realizing that selling it was going to be a nightmare. Like the audience that we were selling to, which was software developers, was extremely difficult. And we were trying to get them to behave and do things that they didn't normally do. Right. And so there was a certain percentage of them that were cutting edge or agreed on the principles of what we were trying to do. But the other vast majority of them just didn't care, and they were very difficult to sell to. I was on the leading edge. Right. So other people on the leading edge got it. But yeah, that's the whole thing. Like, it comes down to sales and marketing, product market fit, validating the market, all that kind of stuff. And to the point is, like, a lot of times when you're trying to solve your own problems, you're totally jaded by that. You just assume like, well, everybody needs this thing, but that's not the case.
Yeah, it's not. In fact, I have a term. There's one story that is in my book, but it's one of my favorites from my own experience. I call it the shiny puppy syndrome. And so what happens to a lot of companies is they have this thing that they feel really passionate about. To your point, maybe it's a problem that they had and they're trying to solve. And they go and they put it out in market and they talk to a lot of people. And those people that they talk to about that idea love it. They love it. They're like, this is amazing. Absolutely. Yeah. And the reason it's called the shiny puppy syndrome is because you can go to the pet store. Well, I don't know. Not many pet stores around anymore. But when I was growing up, there were pet stores and you could see the dogs in the window, right? You'd be like, oh my gosh, it's such a cute dog. I would love it, love it, love it. And they're like, well, come in and pet it. And you're like, okay, I'll come in and pet the dog. I'll play with the dog. And then they're like, would you like to buy the dog? And you're like, ooh, I'm not sure if I'm really ready. That's a lot of responsibility. I have to feed it. I have to walk it. I might have another dog at home. Like, I don't know that I actually can. And that's when things break down, is when you've got that shiny puppy where if you haven't heard no about your product, you might have a shiny puppy on here because
Yeah.
everybody wants it. They say they want it, but until they put their checkbook down and say, okay, yes, I'm going to buy this product, you don't really know. And, it could be a problem. There's lots of companies that sit in that shiny puppy stage for a very long time.
Well, and even if you actually have built something that's not just a shiny puppy, you're still apt to run into people that are just the early adopters. And that was the problem that I had at my company. Was it was easy to find some of those early adopters, and there were a few of them that were on that cutting edge that liked whatever it was you were doing. But then getting to the next level of like general normal people, potential customers, like they didn't care. So I think that's the hard challenge, right? You get all this positive feedback, be it just the shiny puppy or even with some sales with people that are on the leading edge, but then it's really difficult to cross the chasm.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. There's always going to be those first movers that will jump in because they want to be at that cutting edge. They want
Yeah.
to try the new thing. And in order to cross
They like puppies for whatever reason.
they like the puppies. A lot of times we give them the puppies for free too, right?
Yeah.
Like, let's be honest.
And they crap everywhere and they're okay with it.
But the thing that you really need to be looking at is that middle of the bell curve, those people that are not those first movers. Once you've experimented and piloted with those first movers and you have some data, that's what you really need, because those people in the middle need proof. And that's where I think a lot of companies fall down. They go from those first movers. It feels good. They're trying the product. They're giving you good signals. And then they go to move into sort of the general public, so to speak.
And they
don't have enough proof to say, like, this is going to change your world. And it falls down.
So I think we can all agree that startup founders, entrepreneurs are a special breed, and we love them because they're willing to take a risk and they're very passionate about their ideas and will bet the farm on it and all these things. Like they are awesome for a lot of these different reasons, and I've one of those people.
Yeah.
But we're not necessarily good at growing companies or running a business even. And so I'd love to get more of your insight from that, from your experience and the book and everything.
Yeah, of course. And that is the premise so the book is called Grow Up. It is the premise of the book. It's a play on words, obviously, from startup to grow up. But the premise is that what makes you great at starting is not going to be the thing that makes you great at growing. And this is what I have observed over, unfortunately, decades. I say unfortunate because a very big birthday is coming up this weekend. Anyways, the observation has really been these founders are so incredible, but it's not just their superpower alone that's going to help them grow. They actually need to make sure that they have people on their team that hold there's 4 superpowers in my book that span them all, right? Because in order to gain conviction, like we were talking about product market fit, to ramp up the business with the proper data, analytics, and people, all those things, to own your reputation, because we were talking about marketing, and then to persuade customers, like those different things that you need to have in order to grow and scale successfully won't all come from you. And in the very beginning, your company and your superpower, whatever you're great at, are very commingled because you have a very, small group of people helping you build it. So it's just more of the recognition that you are going to need to rely on other people and their skill sets and their superpowers. And if you can do that, you can really embrace that. That's what's going to help you scale. But it also comes with friction, right? Like some personalities are very, very different than your own. You might have some roadblocks and blind spots, and it might hold you back.
And some egos, right? I mean,
yes. Most
startup founders tend to have a little more ego and narcissism than the average person as well.
Yeah, I would say that's true. Maybe not, doesn't come across. I actually know a lot of humble ones too, but they do feel very passionate about what they believe is right. 99% of the time.
So tell me more about the superpowers. You have a quiz on your website that people can do, and we'll put a link in the show notes to figure out which superpower is yours. And I was the builder, So maybe now is to giving my psychology breakdown, but I would love to hear more about the superpowers.
Yeah. So to your point, there is a quiz. You can take it on michelledenogean.com. But the superpower quiz isn't rocket science. It's actually based on the Myers-Briggs personality test. And I'm sure a lot of people have taken that, whether you are an ENTJ or whatever you are in that space. I've translated that into what does that mean in the business world for founders and honestly general leaders. And what it breaks down is that there are 4 different superpowers. So first is the innovator. And the innovator is great at understanding deeply the problems that need to be solved, right? And coming up with solutions for whoever their audience is, whoever their customer set is that they're targeting. So they're the ones that are going to be analytical, problem solvers, but they're really curious and creative and really get in there. They're able to tolerate a lot of risk, which sometimes freaks out some of the other personality types.
Okay.
But that's the innovator, and they're really great at gaining conviction. Then there's the builder, which Matt, you said you are. The builders are awesome. They're analytical. They're very logical, and what they're great at figuring out what the plan needs to be and being very data driven and action oriented. So for them, it's all about, okay, if we have this information, this is what we do next, right? They've got the plan. They're figuring out how to build the company, and they're really great at ramping up. They're the ones you want in your corner when, as an example, you're trying to raise money, if that's something that you are in the process of doing, because they'll have all the data in order to showcase why this company is valuable. The 4th is the connector. This is actually, full disclosure, where I sit. I'm part connector, part innovator, but mostly connector. And these people are very intuitive and very people oriented. They're the ones who will be out in the industry talking to everybody. They're the ones that know where you went on vacation and how many kids you have, and they're prioritizing those relationships. They're very
I am terrible at
that. And they're very influential in the industry. So they're the ones who are going to own your reputation. Their reputation sometimes gets mixed up in the company's reputation because they're so outward. And then the final one is the persuader. The persuader, similar to the builder, is very analytical, but they're people oriented. And so the persuader is the one that is going to win you customers. They're confident, they're convincing, they're great. But it really is a means to an end. They're the ones that are very much about focusing on how are we going to get this deal done and building relationships to foster that steady growth in the company.
So are most founders innovators or builders, or from your experience, where do they usually land?
It's really been interesting. They're not. I think a lot of people associate, because they think innovation, innovator. If I've started a company and I have an innovation, I must be an innovator. But that actually is not true. What that typically means is that there's an innovator somewhere alongside you, right? It takes a team. So it just really depends on the individual. You know, the company that I was most recently at before MindTrip side, the CEO, his name is Guy Gal, that is his name, is a connector. And he walks down the halls at conferences and everybody adores him. He knows everybody. That is his superpower. And he started this incredible real estate company with some founders that are innovators, and right. So it really takes a mix, but I think that is a premise that is a false statement that every founder is an innovator.
Okay.
I think it really depends on the personality, and each one of them has the ability to start a company.
So when I took the survey, I got builder, but as you describe innovator, I feel like I am more of an innovator. So why do you think I got builder, but I think I'm an innovator?
Did you score high in innovator as well?
I don't know if it just told me builder, so I don't know.
Okay, you didn't see the score at the end.
Yeah.
You know, everybody has, I think, you know, a lot of times when you put these types of studies out, it's like, oh, you're one thing,
Yeah.
you're primary. And it is true, most people have a primary superpower, but you also bridge others. So there could be components of the innovator that show up with you as a bridge, right? But I guess I would ask you, do you feel like you are fairly logical and analytical? And
I am.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I'm a mix of the two. And you
Yeah.
also said the builder is probably slightly more risk adverse, which I probably am slightly more risk adverse. Yeah, I'm still, like risk doesn't scare me, but I am the guy that will look at something and be like, no, that's a terrible idea, and this is why. Like, I
Yeah.
am that guy.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and people either love me or hate me for that because I'll meet other local entrepreneurs and I'm like, that's a terrible idea. And I'll be the only one who doesn't want to buy their puppy. Like, I'm the guy that will tell them why their puppy's a terrible idea.
Right. Because in your mind, you're processing
Yeah.
everything you're hearing and analyzing it and saying, like, well, I just don't know if that would really work.
Well, and people like that because I give them real world
Of
feedback, I
course.
guess. But I love the superpowers. And I guess if you're listening and your superpower is not writing code and you need to hire software developers, definitely check us out at fullscale.io. If you need front end, back end, mobile, QA, whatever you need help with, we can help you. So I think a lot of startup founders have these superpowers. But one thing you mentioned is each of these superpowers comes with probably a weakness or a blind spot, right? Like you're good at one of these things, but then you're probably not so good at other things. So you told me earlier I'm a builder, and so what is my blind spot? What's my weakness?
Your weakness would be risk taking.
Interesting, because I don't feel that way.
Well, like we
But
said, the innovator who you might have a little bit of
yeah,
that blind spot is process. So it could be
and I don't like process.
yeah. So it could be a blend.
Yeah. Okay. So what is the weakness of the connector then?
The weakness of the connector is all about control. So they have a hard time with empowerment.
Okay. And then what about the persuader?
The persuader is about being consistent. Persuaders love to do whatever it takes to make things happen. And so being consistent with what you're doing or what you're saying in the marketplace could be something that you would put to the side.
Okay. Did you just describe most salespeople?
A lot of salespeople are persuaders, but here's what I will say. I have had enough people now take this study, and I had this inkling before, that the superpower and the role are not always the same.
Yeah.
Like you could look at this and say, well, every product person, of course, is an innovator. And I could go off and name you 5 product people I know that are builders. And a lot of marketing people are persuaders. It is not a one-to-one role to superpower. And sometimes people are in very different roles than what their superpower actually lends. And it just means that they look at that role differently, right? They're uniquely positioned.
And I think we probably know connectors that do all types of jobs, but they're amazing connectors as well. So I love this conversation, and I feel like a lot of startup founders are great at getting to a certain level. Like if it's 10 employees, 50 employees, 100 employees, whatever it is, they get to a certain place, and then maybe they don't know what to do or they can't get out of the way. Like I have a friend that's in this place now, they have like 100 employees or something. And honestly, I feel like a lot of the problem is like their leadership skills and their ability to delegate and do the things they need to do. They struggle to grow past where they're at. And does your book help people with how to overcome some of those challenges?
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of that has to do, and this is where it's part startup business book and part a little bit self-help book, because it gets into what is it about me as a leader that maybe it's probably not intentional, that is sabotaging what's happening in my company. That's really what we're talking about. And that's what the blind spots are. That's where, you need to kind of open your mind and reflect on, and it's not hard to identify your blind spot. You don't need to take the survey and be like, oh, on the other side of this is this, therefore this is my blind spot. Like you said, you didn't think risk taking was yours. It's really like if you close your eyes and you think about the thing that falls to the very, very bottom of your list that's on your to-do list all the time. And it could be hiring a certain type of person. It could be a process that needs to be put in place that you're just like, oh, I don't want to do that right now. It could be a lot of different things, but that thing that you just avoid doing at all costs will probably give you some insight into what your blind spot is. And that's the thing that as you're looking at, how do I take my company to the next level? I think you nailed it, Matt. A lot of times it is the leadership team that is
Yeah.
actually unintentionally holding back the company from growing. And so you need to understand where, and then when you actually understand what your blind spot is, you can start to recognize the value of these other superpowers and start to appreciate the rest of the team that you need in order to do it. So a lot of that control, you were giving that example of your friend who just can't give up control, maybe a connector, I don't know, but that type of thing
They
starts
are.
to,
They're the connector. You're
yeah,
100% right. They're the
it
connector.
starts to lower. It starts to be like, okay, I see it. I see you. I see that I need you. And they start to see that they need to empower the people and just get out of the way. But it takes that self-reflection, that self-awareness, that growth in order to do it.
Well, and I think we all go through this transition in our career, right? So after, I've been an entrepreneur for 20 years, and when I started out, I was a software developer. I was not a business person. I was not a manager. I didn't know how to lead people. I didn't know anything about marketing. I didn't know anything about sales. So over a long, long period of time, right, you go through a lot of different career changes and growth and learning and all this different stuff. And so we all naturally change. But I think the question is, do you think everybody can change, or do you think they just can change a little bit? Or is it them understanding what they're not good at and then knowing when to get out of the way and let somebody else do that thing? Like, what do you think they have to do to overcome this challenge?
Yeah. First of all, I don't think anybody should or can change. So
Okay.
let's be clear. Like who you are, I go back to the premise, like what made you great at starting, right, is going to continue to make you great. It doesn't stop making you great at what you do. But what you do need to do is gain some awareness and get out of the way. Get out of the way of the people that you may be not allowing to do, or find the person that's going to do that thing that is not your superpower.
And you have
need
to trust them, right? I think
yeah.
To me, I feel like that's the number one thing is you have to hire somebody that you would trust unequivocally to do whatever the thing is, or you're never going to solve that problem, right? So if it's like,
That's right.
I don't trust somebody to do sales or development or run HR or the team, hire, whatever the thing is, if you don't trust people to do those things, you shouldn't have hired them. And the only way you're ever going to overcome these challenges, right, especially if you're the connector and you have these control issues, is you have to hire people that you trust, unequivocally. That's the way I always feel.
Yeah, correct. But that trust comes with respecting the role, respecting the things that those people are really good at doing and they're going to bring to the table. So it's a little bit complicated because it's not as easy as like, I've met you, Matt, now I trust you. We get along. It's not a buddy thing. It's like, I need to fundamentally respect what this person brings to the table and be okay with it. You talked about the innovator and needing to hire somebody with process and roll that into the equation. You might say, yep, I'm going to hire that person. But the minute they put process in, that innovator is, whoa. The innovator a lot of the time does what great innovators do. Because what happens is, if you take a software company as an example, because I know that's your background, right? Software company led by an innovator will always be looking at the big rocks. Somebody will come in and try to put process in because you're getting a lot of customer issues flowing through the pipes and they need to be able to prioritize those things. Then all of a sudden that innovator sees that and sees the big rock things that they loved, that they think are super important, slow down.
Yeah.
And so they jump back in. They're like, ooh, this can't happen. They jump in, they peel off a team of developers and they say, let's go make this happen. And the challenge with that is now this person that just put all this process in place is disempowered. The customer issues are stacking up, right? So you have to be mindful and aware and appreciate that that person brought process to the table in a way to help you solve your customer issues. But you could love that person. You could want to go grab a beer with them every night of the week and still have that reaction, right? So it's getting in touch with that reaction and trying to let people do what they do best.
Yeah, I used to hate that person. I've slowly learned to love them. At full scale, the last company I was working on was called At Capacity, and we had 5 or 6 software developers, and we hired CJ, who works for us. CJ, shout out to you. You're awesome. And he helped do product operations, kind of running the team, the day-to-day requirements and all that. And I always joked and told everybody, I'm like, I work for CJ. the process. I was like, I hate all this. Like, I couldn't do this without CJ. But that makes me wonder who is the personality type that hates to follow the rules and always thinks outside the box?
It's the innovator.
Yeah, that's me. I'm the innovator.
So go back and retake the test and see your
Yeah,
score, because I bet you were right there on the cusp of those two.
and honestly, people in general frustrate me because I feel like most of them don't do a lot of critical thinking or thinking outside the box, and like that is my line of thinking at all times. Like I always have like 5 different ideas. We could do this, we could do this, we could do this, we could do this, and I feel like nobody else does, and that would drive me crazy.
Yeah,
So
that is definitely more in the innovator. But I see both of them after getting to know you a little bit. I see both of them in you. So I bet you're on
all
the
right,
cusp.
all right. I think there's also parts of the connector that I think align with me, and there's parts of it that don't as well, for sure. But I can't remember anything about anybody. Like I honestly saw one of our employees' wives the other day at some place, and I'm like didn't recognize her at first, and I felt bad afterwards. Like, oh man, that was his wife. Sorry, Chris. But I just don't. I'm not good at remembering people's names and faces. I'm not that part of the connector. But I do love. I love doing this kind of stuff. I like
Yeah,
talking to other people.
yeah,
So I think it's interesting. Point is, like, we all have different aspects of all these different things, and the point is understanding more than anything, like what you're not good at, what you don't enjoy doing. And honestly, I still have this question every day. I mean, now I own a business. I have 300 employees, and every week I still ask myself, like, what do I really want to spend my time on? Like, what do I really want to do? Do I want to do the podcast? Do I want to write a newsletter? Startuphustlenews.com. Like, do I want to do sales? Do I want to like go start some other company? Like, what do I want to do? Like, I still struggle with these, and I guess it's probably the innovator in me that is always just like
yeah.
going.
Spinning,
Yeah.
spinning the wheels, thinking of new ideas and new ways to do things.
How do I make it stop?
I don't. Do you take the red pill? I don't know, actually.
How do I make it stop?
I ask that to myself all the time because I feel like, have an issue in the morning when I wake up. I'm an early riser. I don't know about you, Matt. I'm an early riser. And the minute I wake up, my brain goes a million miles an hour about everything. And I've been trying to stop that for a decade. Like, just slow it down. Why am I, processing
Yeah.
hundreds of different things I need to do every morning at like 4:30 in the morning? So if you
I got a
find
worse one for
here,
you. I got a worse one. Like I can read a book to my kid, like putting them to bed. And while I'm reading the book, I can't even think about what I'm reading, but I'm reading it and I'm thinking about work.
oh
Like
yeah,
I'm thinking about work, but I'm mindlessly actually reading to my kid. Like,
that's how I feel about audiobooks, Matt. I can't do audiobooks because when I start listening to that in the car, my brain like overrides what's
yeah.
coming out of the speaker and starts thinking about it's a problem. We share
So
it.
I was in the Philippines for 3 weeks, and I was driving there, and driving there is an incredible thing because it's like a lot of weird 2-lane roads, like kind of going through a mountain, and so there's a lot of turns, but you also have people that are driving like little motorcycles and bicycles, people walking in the street. You got big buses, you got slow cars, you got to pass. Like it's chaos at all times. And my sister is sitting next to me as I'm driving, and I told her, I'm like, I don't know how to really explain it, but this driving, like this is how my mind works. For whatever reason, like I enjoy this driving. Like this is how my mind works. Like this chaos for whatever reason. And she just looked at me. She's like, "You've never explained yourself better than that." It's like I don't know. It's just how the way my mind works. So I
Yeah.
actually kind of enjoy that crazy driving.
Yeah, I get it. We were in Italy for our honeymoon, and my husband loves to drive everywhere we go. And he's like, "This is great. They are so crazy, but I get the rule. The rule is that you only worry about what's in front of you, not what's behind you. And if you can get that in your head, it's awesome." And he loved it. I sat there like holding on. I was like, "Oh my gosh, what's about to happen?" And he
My
just
wife
was,
was terrified.
yeah. So I totally understand what you're saying.
Well, I really appreciate having you on the show today. What else can you tell us about your book and the advisory services that you offer as well for people if they're interested?
Yeah. So the book itself is a little bit of a workbook. So there's some reflection questions in there. I think real thing to take away is there's so many startups that start, and we all know that unfortunately, 90% of them don't end up becoming companies. My belief is that the cure to that, when you have an amazing idea, the cure is the people that you have around you. People are the cure to startup failure. And when you embrace that, and the reason I say that is because even you could have started something that doesn't have, has the shiny puppy, right? Has the shiny puppy. You realize you're sitting with the shiny puppy and nobody's going to buy the puppy. If you have the right team around you, you figure out how to pivot the company to make that work. And so that's why I really believe so wholeheartedly in the book and really that people is the cure, is because pivoting could be the best opportunity that you could have. But you just need to be aware. You need to have the right people by your side to make that happen. So that's the book. It's called Grow Up, Take Your Startup to the Next Level. It's available on Amazon. My advisory services, I help founders really reflect and think, like they will share what's going on in their companies, and I will listen. I understand deeply, their superpower and where they're coming from and what they're trying to accomplish. And I like to tell people that I approach them with very directly with care. That's sort of my leadership style, as you would say. So I will tell you what I see and help you, guide you in what you need and the types of people that you need on the team to make that happen. I also help them with their, positioning and their branding. Of course, I could do that in my sleep. Good, bad, or indifferent. So that's another area where I do play an advisory role. So yes, I am available for that. I also am, full-time operating at a company called MindTrip. That is not a fraction. I am actually their full-time CMO. So, I don't take on a ton of advisory clients at this time, but they are an AI-powered travel platform, brand spanking new. We've been actually public to the market since May of this year. So we've only really been officially live and out there for, 3 months now? I think we're July. So just starting, but I like to tell people that that's also what makes me who I am. I'm not just a professor at a university. I'm not a former founder. I am literally living and breathing this every day still, very current with the things that are happening. And I think that just makes me a better advisor for it.
Okay. Well, I really appreciate having you on the show today. I think I learned a lot about myself today and my own weaknesses and problems and struggles I need to deal with, but I don't know how to make them stop. But at least I'm aware. I'm more self-aware, even though I don't know what to do with it. But
hopefully you leave here too with some greatness. Like, wow, I really understand what makes me great, because that's the point.
Yeah. Well, once again, this was Michelle Denogean. You can check out her website, and we'll have a link in the show notes. Check out her book called Grow Up. Thank you so much for being on the show today, Michelle.
Thanks for having me, Matt. It was great to get to know you. Look forward to catching up soon.
All right. Thank you.